This is not just a story about card games and money. It is a contest of survival, trust, and betrayal. When a man falls deep into the temptation of beauty, even a gambling master can step into an abyss of no return. This film, Tazza, One-Eyed Jack, is different from the previous two. This time, the director uses the method of card gambling to let us feel how a beautiful woman can use her charm to get everything she wants. All right, without further ado, today, let me show you how a woman relies on her beauty again and again to push men into the depths of ruin. As everyone knows, in the big casinos, whenever you see a woman dressed seductively, you must avoid her at all costs. Because such a woman may only need a few seconds, and without you noticing, she can secretly use master-level cheating skills to steal your chips worth $1 million. And young me relied on this method of cheating, making huge profits every single day.
에이, 씨발, 커도 문제야.
But unexpectedly this time, the experienced young me failed. Just like her usual tricks, she pretended to get close and continued to steal their chips. But her little tricks had already been seen through by Aekku, who was nearby, so he only smiled without saying a word. Seeing that the two of them ignored her, young me turned around, preparing to leave.
왜 그래요? 나 가슴 뛰었잖아.
심장이 약하네. 손은 아주 대범한데. 자.
What she did not know was that this man was actually the disciple of the gambling master Ma-gwi. Exposed, young me became furious. She believed they had ruined her work, so she chased after them to demand an explanation.
씨발 새끼들, 야, 너 거기 안 서? 아니, 씨발, 너 뭔데 남의 영업장에서 행패야?
영업장?
After learning that young me was a habitual offender, Aekku had an idea. Yes, he wanted young me to join his team, because recently he had a big gambling scheme that needed someone like her. And standing beside him was Il-chool, who was also someone Aekku had just taken a liking to. Since Il-chool was the son of a gambling master, from a young age he had an amazing talent with playing cards. One day, a woman suddenly appeared. She came into Il-chool's life, like a beam of light. But what he did not expect was that this woman became the beginning of his nightmare. The woman's name was Madonna, and with her stunning looks, she easily approached Il-chool and got to know him. But unexpectedly, just the second day after they met, Il-chool accidentally crashed into a luxury car. And the one who stepped out of the car was none other than Madonna's boyfriend. At this moment, Il-chool still did not realize that he had fallen into their trap. Unable to afford the compensation for the luxury car, Il-chool was eventually lured to sit down at the gambling table. Thinking he was skilled at cheating, Il-chool was full of fantasies about using gambling to make up for the loss. But he did not know that the man was an even more cunning cheat than his father. As expected, the young and reckless Il-chool, under their carefully crafted scam, not only lost all his money, but also fell into massive debt. In an instant, Il-chool's life collapsed. Every day he was hounded and beaten by debt collectors. Such a broken life eventually made him think of ending it all. At the crucial moment, it was Aekku who appeared and completely pulled him out of the abyss. Looking at the pitiful Il-chool in front of him, Aekku promised to help him pay off his gambling debts.
내가 니 뭐 믿고? 너네 청량리 용팔이 애들이냐?
야, 이 까마귀 새끼야! 어디 남의 형님 이름을
그 가서 용팔이한테 전해. 애꾸가 보증 섰다고.
By this time, the name of One-Eye Aekku had already spread throughout Korea. Anyone who entered or left a casino knew him. The scene shifts. Aekku takes the wounded Il-chool to a bar and uses a unique way to warn him about the consequences of being obsessed with gambling.
준이 엄마! 준이 엄마?
죄송해요. 지금
지금 나가서 얘랑 한번 하고 올 수 있겠어요?
지금요? 네.
아이, 농담이야. 가서 게임해요.
Aekku told Ilchul through this example that gambling was no different from illegal substances. Once you touch it, you will completely lose your soul and become a hollow puppet. So he wanted to persuade Ilchul never to touch it again. Unfortunately, the stubborn Ilchul did not listen to Aekku's advice. He believed only gambling could free him from a poor life. With no other choice, seeing how stubborn Ilchul was, Aekku eventually had to let him join his team. In this team, besides the newly joined Ilchul and young Mi, there were also two veteran cheating masters. One was the handsome Kachi, and the other was the older Mr. Kwan. When Kakashi saw a beautiful woman joining, his eyes lit up and he spoke excitedly.
뭘 믿고 같이 일을 해?
그럼 너부터 좀 보자, 쓸만한지.
나야 죽이지.
보고 괜찮으면 나도 한번 보여줄게, 화끈하게.
진짜지? 진짜지 딴 말하기 없기다.
Then Kakashi began to show his special skill with fluid shuffling techniques. After a few casual moves, he confidently started dealing the cards. And in Kakashi's hands, these cards seemed to be filled with magic. Whatever points he wanted, that's exactly what appeared.
저같이 된다 그래갖고. 그래서 까치야. 저같이.
Watching his talented subordinates, Aekku revealed a satisfied smile. Next, it was young Mi's turn to show her specialty. And her specialty was the art of seduction. Of course, this was also the skill men most enjoyed watching.
아니지. 내가 보여주기로 한 건 너잖아.
그치?
그러니까 너만 봐야지.
씨발 존나 멋있어.
이 앞에 세워져 있는 BMW 그 네 거니?
그것도 어떻게 알았대?
차가 아주 족같이 생겨가지고. 차에서 기다릴래? 너만 보여줄게.
오케이. 죄송합니다. 대신에 제가 자세하게 보고 자세하게 얘기해줄게요. 아, 이 사람아 찾기도 없이 어디가. 그냥 이리 와 빨리.
It turned out young Mi had always been showing off her specialty, only her specialty was theft. After everyone got to know each other, Aekku began to introduce their next scam. This time, their target was a wealthy man named Moolyounggam. Mool was in the real estate business, so Aekku arranged for Kakashi and young Mi to pose as a couple and approach him under the pretense of buying a house. Through investigation, they learned that Mool was not only lustful, but also narrow-minded and extremely proud. So they mocked the house during the viewing, deliberately crushing Mool's pride and making him feel insulted. Then during the dinner opportunity, Kachi called away Mool's men, leaving young Mi alone with Mool. Once they left, young Mi began to complain to Mool about her husband, while at the same time enticing him.
저기요, 뭐 재미난 거 없어요?
Just like that, under the guidance of Kachi and young Mi, a venting gambling match began. To gain satisfaction, Mool summoned the most skilled cheat from his village, but this kind of cheat was nowhere near Kakachi's level. As expected, in less than one afternoon, Mool lost 100 million won to Kakachi. Seeing their triumphant expressions, the proud Mool felt even worse inside. Such a petty man could never let it go, so in anger he challenged Kachi again to a gambling match worth 1 billion won. To secure victory this time, Mool spent a fortune to hire two masters, but these two masters were none other than Ilchul and Mr. Kwan, who had been sent by Aekku. In such a seamless setup, how could Mool possibly win? Although among the 5 people at the table, 4 were from Aekku's side, they still cooperated closely to make Kachi and young Mi lose to Mool, and the purpose of doing this was to make Ilchul and Mr. Kwan completely gain Mool's trust. After the game ended, the triumphant Mool happily invited them to dinner and even took out 10 million won as a reward to thank the two of them. When they had fully gained Mool's trust, it was finally time for the last step. Kachi called Mool on the phone.
어이,
예, 전데요.
그래요.
우리 한 판 더 합시다. 진짜 씨발 존나 크게.
에?
제가 지고는 못 살아요.
And this time, they set the gamble at 5 billion won. Hearing 5 billion won, everyone's faces lit up with joy because the bet was so large. To ensure there would be no mistakes, they began rehearsing day and night. And during these days of harsh practice, Ilchul asked Aekku a question.
우리 아버지요. 그 사람 어떤 사람이었어요?
Facing Ilchul's inquiry, Aekku silently removed his glasses and then replied to Ilchul with a heartfelt sentence.
도박판에서 말이야. 상대를 제외한 나머지는 항상 내 편이어야 한다.
And it was this meaningful sentence that later saved Ilchul's life. Soon the final gambling match began. Just like their usual tricks at the start, under Ilchul's hints, Mool easily won a few rounds against Kachi. This made Kakashi, who lost several times in a row, instantly furious. He stood up and began shouting insults at Mool.
씨발 아가리 족대가리 박아버리기 전에 그 입 좀 다무셔. 에?
야, 이 상놈의 새끼야. 서천 앞바다에 고기밥 한번 내볼텨?
As the two sides quarreled, Mr. Kwan stepped forward, pretending to mediate, easing the tense atmosphere. And at the same time, they used the distraction to secretly switch the playing cards. Just like that, under their sleight of hand, the final step officially began. As expected, this time Mool's cards were huge, an extremely rare straight flush.
한 천만 가볼까?
콜?
1000 받고 2000 더.
콜. 콜.
그래 가자. 2등까지만 봅시다. 콜. 자, 2등이요.
아이 카원. 빨리 좀 마셔. 수학여행 왔나.
빙.
삥이면 나도 삥.
1억.
죽어요?
Ilchul used the motion of putting out his cigarette to signal Mool not to follow, but holding a straight flush. How could Mool listen to him?
전부 네.
저는 빠질게요. 심장 약해서.
받아요 콜.
Seeing Kachi push all his chips in, Mool could no longer suppress his joy, and he began to laugh with delight. At this moment, he could not control his boasting.
안 받으면 어떡하나? 얼마나 맴조는 줄 알아? 손에 땀 좀 봐. 어? 땀 좀 봐. 어? 땀 좀 봐. 마지막에 꽂혔네. 2, 3, 5, 6에서 새빨간 새가 한 마리 날아와 꽂혀버렸어. 줄도 맞고 꽃도 맞아버렸네. 어?
Just when everyone thought Mool had won, Kachi suddenly spoke calmly.
저도 마지막에 꽂혔는데요.
뭐?
저도 기다렸거든요. 스티플. 8, 9, 자, 마에 장이 날아와 꽂혔습니다. 줄도 맞고 꽃도 맞아버렸어.
In that instant, Mool felt the whole world collapse. He wished so much this was just a nightmare, that in the next second, everything would return to normal. Faced with this cruel reality, although Mool was full of unwillingness, he could only accept with sorrow. They thought the scam would end perfectly this time, but unexpectedly, the stubborn Mool could not swallow this humiliation and actually wanted to fight Kachi again. And at the same time, a car slowly drove up. It turned out to be delivering money to Mool. Seeing Mool sinking deeper, Mr. Kwan and Il-chool could hardly suppress their happy smiles. But when Il-chool saw the person stepping out of the car, he was instantly stunned.
아, 타짜.
The woman was actually Madonna, the one who had deceived him. At this moment, Il-chool still did not know that Madonna had betrayed him. He always believed that the previous gamble was lost simply because his card skills were not as good. So while Mool invited him for a drink, he asked about Madonna. From Mool's mouth, he learned that Madonna's ex-husband had recently passed away, and after her husband's death, all the property went into Madonna's hands. And with this huge fortune, under Mool's deception, Madonna invested in his real estate. But Mool had no intention of earning with Madonna. Instead, he planned to use this gambling opportunity to swallow all of Madonna's fortune. After realizing that Madonna had been deceived, the love-struck Il-chool, after hesitating again and again, braved the heavy rain and went to Madonna's home. He confessed their scam to Madonna, hoping she would withdraw her investment. After hearing Il-chool's words, Madonna showed a bewildered expression.
사람이 왜 그렇게 순진합니까? 변한 게 하나도 없네, 씨.
Il-chool would never imagine that what he was describing was actually about himself. That night, Il-chool naively believed he had found true love. But unexpectedly the next day, Mool arrived there with his men. That feeling of betrayal was 100 times more painful than death. This was the second time Il-chool had been deceived by Madonna. As expected, this time things looked grim for Il-chool. He was taken by Mool into a car, ready to be thrown into the sea. This dangerous woman once again shattered Il-chool's world completely.
아주 조시답게 아주 그냥 출발이야.
And to rescue Il-chool from Mool at the critical moment, Aekku appeared in a speeding car, risking his life as he crashed into Mool's vehicle. Then, covered in wounds, he staggered out of the car and ultimately managed to rescue Il-chool safely. Meanwhile, because Il-chool's matter was exposed, their team also fell into crisis, hunted down by Mool's men. Facing the aggressive thugs, Kachi braced his body against the door, giving young Mi a chance to escape.
너는
가 빨리.
같이 가지.
빨리 가라고, 씨. 야! 살아 돌아가면 인간적으로 하면 주라.
이게 뭐래? 야, 죽지 마라.
But before young Mi could leave, a scream from Kachi came from upstairs. Fortunately, Mool's men did not kill Kachi. Instead, they took him to an abandoned warehouse and cruelly cut his tendons with a drill as punishment. Knowing he had caused a disaster, Il-chool wanted to cut off his own hand to make up for the mistake. And at this moment, Aekku spoke of his own past. When he was very young, he encountered a man named Ma-gwi, and because he lost to him, his eye was destroyed on the spot. Ma-gwi was terrifying. He never showed mercy to anyone. And Il-chool's father was killed by Ma-gwi. Hearing this, Il-chool put the knife away, because now he had a new goal, to avenge his father. But since Kachi was still in Mool's hands, Aekku had no choice but to step in himself. A few months later, Aekku's team had long since disbanded because of their last mistake. As for Il-chool, he kept going in and out of casinos, trying to find Ma-gwi's trace. One day, a familiar figure suddenly appeared. Il-chool looked up, and it was Kakachi. Il-chool thought Kakachi had come for revenge, but Kakachi told him shocking news.
Aekku 죽었다.
Mool had spent a fortune to hire a powerful opponent to confront Aekku, which led to Aekku's death. And that opponent was none other than Ma-gwi, the man who had blinded Aekku's right eye. Kakachi, trembling with fear, said he had never seen such a terrifying person. The frightening Ma-gwi even sent Kachi to deliver a message, telling him to go get back the money for the meal. And at that moment, Il-chool instantly realized Ma-gwi was actually Madonna's ex-husband, because that was the very line he had spoken during his battle with Ma-gwi.
그럼 우리 이렇게 하는 거야. 어? 1000만 원 카드를 치자. 이기는 놈이 뭐 문짝을 갈든 자전거를 새로 사든 뭐 알아서 하는 걸로. 어때?
아이, 그건 아니지. 나는 국밥값도 받아야 되는데.
And that meal was the very dinner Il-chool had bought for Madonna. It turned out from the very beginning, Ma-gwi knew Il-chool was Jacqui's son, and that was why he kept targeting him. At this moment, the fire of revenge in Il-chool's heart burned even stronger. Then, through Madonna, he contacted Ma-gwi and decided to challenge him to a life-and-death gambling match. But facing Mool, Madonna, and Ma-gwi alone, Il-chool was almost walking straight to his own doom. Because this was a death match, before it started, Mool showed them the fate of the loser. He tied iron barrels to a man covered in blood, and as the barrels sank, the man was dragged quickly into the water by the heavy pull. If anyone was caught cheating, then that would be their end as well. Seeing such a thrilling gamble, Ma-gwi looked eager with excitement. This time, the casino was set up by Mool on a closed island, and the stakes were as high as 10 billion won. It seemed everyone had prepared for certain death. But unexpectedly, on the night before the match, Madonna went to meet Il-chool once again. Facing the woman who had deceived him twice, Il-chool felt both angry and helpless.
내일 이길 수 있니?
내가 이겼으면 좋겠어?
아니. 마귀가 이기는 것도 바라지 않아. 무령감도.
뭐야, 그 얘기하러 온 거야?
마귀, 무령감 그리고 나까지. 모두 같은 편이야. 절대로 이길 수 없어. 너 혼자선. 우리 돈 만들고 가자.
Il-chool chose to believe her once again. Madonna said she would drug everyone's drinks and told Il-chool not to drink, and when all were unconscious, they could take the money and run away together. The next day, before the match began, everyone was tied to iron barrels, and the death match officially started. Unexpectedly, in his very first hand, Il-chool was lucky enough to get a jack, which gave Ma-gwi a bad feeling. So he began speaking about Il-chool's father, Ma-gwi, right in front of him, trying to crush Il-chool's mental defenses. At that moment, Il-chool suddenly asked Ma-gwi a question.
왜 죽였어, 이 개새끼야?
Ma-gwi calmly answered that it was because his father had cheated him, and not just once. But the truth was, he wanted to take Ma-gwi's fortune all for himself. When he caught Ma-gwi and discovered the money had been swapped, Ma-gwi flew into a rage and took Ma-gwi's life. And the reason he had set his eyes on Il-chool was also because of that fortune. Il-chool looked at him with furious eyes and drank the red wine in his hand. It looked like Il-chool was already prepared to die. The next second, he pushed all his chips in.
뭐예요? 플래시 메이드요? 이 짝도 플래시 그림인데.
죽어요.
But facing Il-chool's bold move, Ma-gwi did not feel fear. He confidently pushed all his chips in as well. And while betting, he could not help but laugh proudly. It turned out Ma-gwi had already calculated Il-chool's cards.
나 카프로시야. 너 플러시 메이드지? 나한테는 안 되지. 왜? 영감한테는 스페이드 킹이 떨어졌고 스페이드 에이스는 처음에 내가 버렸거든.
But what Ma-gwi never expected was that Il-chool's final card was the Ace of Spades.
이거? 히든에 들어왔는데. 확실해? 네가 버린 거? 버렸으면 여기 있겠네. 어떻게? 모가지 걸 수 있겠냐?
Then Il-chool began to flip over the discarded cards one by one.
아야, 뭐가 됐든 하나는 담가야 쓰겠다.
Afraid that Il-chool was cheating, Ma-gwi quickly pressed down tightly on the last discarded card. But what he did not know was that the card he was holding had already been secretly switched by Madonna. It turned out that last night when Madonna revealed her plan, Mool had already been called into the room by Il-chool. Learning that Madonna planned to drug him, Mool, of course, would not let her off. And before arranging the match, Il-chool had already spoken with Mool, promising that if he won against Ma-gwi, he would give half of his winnings to Mool as payment. Having done business for decades, Mool naturally would not miss such an opportunity to profit. So he agreed to Il-chool's plan. So he forced Madonna into carrying out the scheme between them. And the signal for cheating was exactly the line Il-chool spoke.
짝귀는 왜 죽였냐?
Il-chool knew very well that trying to cheat in front of Ma-gwi was never an easy thing, so he gave the task of switching the cards to Madonna. Because Ma-gwi's eyes were fixed entirely on Il-chool, he paid no attention to the discarded pile, which allowed Madonna to switch the cards with ease. And all of this perfectly proved the words Aekku had once left behind. If you want to win, then aside from your opponent, everyone else must be on your side. At the moment the final card was revealed, the outcome was already decided. Even Ma-gwi, who possessed top-level cheating skills, ultimately lost to the hands of a woman. With Mool's command, the iron barrel tied to Ma-gwi was thrown down. Struggling desperately to survive, Ma-gwi clung tightly to the edge of the pool with his bare hands. Watching the man who had exploited her for years struggling in agony, Madonna finally waited for her moment of revenge. Expressionless, she picked up the drill, and as the blade lowered slowly, hearing Ma-gwi's screams, she wished this cruel process could wash away the guilt she carried for what she had done to Il-chool. As they left the casino, Mool, who had promised a 50-50 split, grew greedy on the way back and took Il-chool to a remote place.
내가 생각을 해봤는데 아무래도 이건 아니란 말이여. 아니 나는 돈을 투자했고 자네는 몸으로만 뛰었는데 20억이나 가져간다? 그건 아니지.
But what Mool never expected was that Il-chool had already anticipated this move. Just as he was overjoyed, the driver suddenly stabbed him with a knife. Mool, who had always calculated against others, never thought he would be betrayed by his own man. This time, Mool, like Ma-gwi, lost completely, and it was that very greed that pushed him into the abyss. Only at the moment before his death did Mool finally understand. There are no eternal winners, only sacrifices to desire. In the end, Mool was pushed into the sea along with his car by Il-chool and the driver who had followed Mool for so many years, understood one truth. When you have already won what you wanted, you must learn to stop and walk away. Then he left the place carrying a bag full of money. In the end, Il-chool did not choose to keep all the money for himself, but instead shared it with his old teammates. After watching Tazza, One-Eyed Jack, my biggest feeling is that there are never true winners in the casino, only souls consumed by greed. When gamblers finally give up gambling, that is when they truly step into victory. Gambling has never been a fair game. In this world filled with desire, everyone, like Il-chool, has been confused by temporary pleasure, wandering at the crossroads of life. But facing confusion in life is not the terrible part. The real challenge is learning to stop losses in time, learning to break free from the chains of desire. After all, true victory is not defeating your opponent at the gambling table, but mastering yourself in life, finding inner peace and redemption. When Il-chool and Madonna joined forces to defeat Ma-gwi, we clearly understood. Desire is a bottomless pit. Once you fall into it, it keeps devouring your soul until it is burned away by the flames of greed. All right, that's all for today. See you next time.